Call the meeting to at 5:00, and welcome Channel 32 and I don't see the Temple City Star. Oh, is he there? Okay. I've got the podium with me. Welcome you all to the meeting. The land acknowledgement. The town of Cardston acknowledges that we are located
camping on each EJ Woodlot if we can, and then the exact same route out of town and returning into town. The only difference, which doesn't affect you, is that we're going to do 160 kilometers, which is 100 miles. We found that there was quite a few people that didn't want to do the 140 because they wanted 100 miles. Crazy, but that's the plan this year. And then we also want to offer a beginner route for that age 12 to 15 that couldn't participate in the kiddie race, but they're not quite ready for the longer route. So we'll take some planning for that. The same image from last year. The green part is the route, and then the little area in front of between the temple and the high school would be just the parking that we were using. Again, with just in front of the high school being blocked off. We actually blocked it off. We were initially going to block off down by the pool, but we brought it all the way to the top of the hill, so traffic coming would just turn into the high school parking lot. And we found that worked pretty well. We gave people a place they did come. From last year. So our request for 2025 is that we have the same staging area. We shut down a little chunk of road in front of the high school. We have the camping on the EJ Wood lot, the shower access for our participants. I called down there last week and they said less than 10 people utilized it. I don't think that's a big ask. And then we just need a letter of approval from the town so we can get a permit for next year.
Any questions from Councillor?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this to Cardston. Innovative, incredible. I was one of the little people standing on the side cheering up by the golf course as they all just went past. Incredible. There just wasn't a bad hill like it's nothing, and I was dying. But it was incredible. So thank you, thank you. I think it's fantastic.
Just positive comments. We had friends from Edmonton that came and did that and were very, very impressed with the quality of the organization and everything pertaining to the race. So thank you so much.
I did forget to mention, we did have a little bit of a glitch, so I didn't get all of the demographic information, but I'm willing to bet it's over half of our participants traveled more than an hour to get here.
Yeah.
That was the same as last year. And we only had about 14 Cardston participants this year. So.
Councillor Kennedy?
I have a question. Kind of, you were talking about 4th Avenue. I live on there, not that I would do this, but do you guys is your association carry insurance? Like, say, I mean, obviously, on the road, but it comes out of nowhere and hits a car. Like, who's the rider gets injured? Like, who's at fault here? Like, I know it's an insurance question, but like, do you guys carry insurance?
Yeah, insurance.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was curious. If an accident happened, is it liable? Is it you guys liable? Is it? I mean, obviously, if I hit them, I'm probably liable. But.
No, our insurance policy actually states that if our town person is responsible for anything, and so our insurance policy that we get through A1 Insurance covers all of that, and it's actually mandatory we have that to get our Alberta transportation permit.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, good work. If for some reason you didn't have camping available at the EJ Woodlot, what would a good plan B be? You have a good plan B? So something wasn't that critical if it was 8 to 10. They booked early enough that you probably wouldn't camp there or something.
We found that most of the people that camped there were the ones that lived in Lethbridge, that they probably would have just driven in anyway, but because it was available, they came and they used that.
Anything else then? Thank you, Carly, for that presentation. I don't want to speak for council, but I can't imagine that we have status quo for 2025. I mean, you guys pulled it off, you did really well. It's a great event for the community. But we'll get back to you very shortly.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Council's going to move this and move our school quick. No.
I can honestly say I almost backed it.
Back to the agenda, item 4, which is adoption of the minutes from June 4th, 2024 meeting. Councillor Burton.
I make a motion to adopt the minutes from the June 4th, 2024 CCW.
Any comments or questions on that? Seeing none, and in favor? Move to item 5, bylaw and policy, bylaw 1582, utility rates. Jeff, I'll throw that one to you.
Okay, sounds good. So council, it's time to start talking about updating the utility rate law. And so tonight all I was hoping for was I want to present you some information. If there's some gaps in that information for you guys to make a decision, then I want to bring those back to a future meeting. A little bit of time here, so we're okay. So I want to go over a few things tonight, and then give your feedback on where you see these going. Keep in mind, things like utility rates, taxes, they're part math, but they're also highly political. So that's coming to you to say, we've got to make sure that your citizens are comfortable with the numbers that we're talking about and the increases that you want to propose. So what I put in your package was, one was simply a copy. The first part was just a copy of the existing bylaw. And then the second was a bit of a history of the rate, just to give you an idea where that's gone since 2016. And so looking at that, you can see we broke it into 3 categories: residential, and commercial. The average use in that category is 23 cubic meters a month. So remember, this is playing the average of consumption. So there's much higher users, there's much lower users. But at 23 cubic meters a month, things like a monthly bill for water since 2016 has gone from $38.80 to $60, and it's substantial. Utility rates have increased on residential, commercial on the average about 41% over that same time. And then we broke our institutional into large and small. So we have a number of small and so with the bulk in the last 4 years. So since 2022 is when there was a period of rapid until 2019, and then it really went down just to what I'll say is inflationary changes, 2.5%, 3%, that kind of number. And then in 2022 it escalated up quite considerably again based on the decisions of previous council. And so I just want to give you some idea of that history because it reflects the impact on the end user, so that you have that context when we're talking about changes.
So Jeff, as a portion, I don't know if you have this number at your fingertips or not, but the institutional compared to the residential, what in natural dollars, roughly what percentage are we talking?
Have they changed or compared to?
In total revenue. You may not have that number.
I don't have it handy, but this is the kind of thing like I can bring all this back to the next meeting too. So I know on the average user, I just don't know on our total revenues. I have this year's budget, but I didn't do a history of the total.
Yeah, so what I'm looking for is you bring in this much revenue gross in a year for utilities, what percentage of those dollars?
Oh, I see.
Institutional as opposed to
yep.
residential.
Okay. Yeah, that's no problem to get that. I'll have it for you for next meeting. The other thing to keep in mind that just complicates these discussions is there's this huge variable component on consumption. So for example, if we would have gone into water restrictions in July this year, our revenues would have gone significantly down because there's a consumption base to the rate. And so if we have a particularly rainy year and people don't water as much, then our revenues go down. And so there is quite a wide, when we take the Olympic average when we did the averages, so we took so many years and knocked off the top and the bottom, just because there's such a variety in consumption. So that's always something that complicates it as well, is depending on the season, the moisture that year, how dry it is, water restrictions, that impacts dramatically. But thank you, Councillor, I'll bring that back.
I looked at all those rates and I this one and the previous ones. I think we've been fairly aggressive. And the reason we wanted to be aggressive is to have enough reserves to create reserves. We will never have enough reserves, we know that. But I really feel that we need to slow down here on the increase. And I really don't think, personally, I would want to see the rates go more than 2% per year for the next few years. I really could see that going higher at this time. But what I want to know, if we were to do that, how would that impact our reserve and the whole of the financial aspect? And that you cannot give us the answer today, but if you could, well, if you could, go ahead.
So to give you some idea, just when you're thinking in terms of the total numbers, I'm just thinking, let me take one step back. In a perfect world, where money is not an object and people will pay whatever rate you want to put in front of them, it's not the world we live in. But in that world, to cover off all of the expenses and all of everything within our asset management plan, we would raise another $340,000 just in water alone to cover everything off 100%. But that would be roughly, I mean, you'd be talking a 30% increase in 1 year to do that, utility rate, right? So I also went and did a bit of a look, because I was trying to understand for you guys to say, okay, let's agree on 2% there, if that's what you're saying. So based on consumption, that's somewhere, every percent is between about $13,000 and $20,000, depending on consumption, right? What the consumption that year would be. But if I took a typical year, it's somewhere in between. So when you're thinking about 2%, you're thinking somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. So to make up a $342,000, if we could, every ounce of depreciation coming out of an entire category, you have what I think is not a reasonable amount on your hands in any short amount of time. That's for sure. Wastewater, by the way, kind of the same ideas, about the same amount. One thing I'm hopeful on, and we can delve into this some other time, and I fear bringing it up with Councillor Grainger as the chair. I'll have to spend half the meeting on it. But Associated just gave us a technical memorandum that you would no doubt be interested in, but it was basically looking at the utility cost and looking at the greenhouse gas emission impacts because it's applying to Emissions Reduction Alberta and to FCM. And the numbers came back even, I would say, as a greater spread versus what we have and what we were looking at versus what we anticipate this to cost. So we're looking at utility and those kind of costs being at they currently are. And the sewer plant is our largest electricity consumer by a landslide. Second place, I don't know what it is. And it's like $200,000 less than the sewer plant. So I'm encouraged that maybe we will see some reduction in operation expenses that we'll recapture what we can send to reserves. And then just finally on that, the last page I put in your package was just looking at the reserve account year-end balances. Because for those of you, Councillor Court, Mayor, if you go back, say, even 3 terms ago, we weren't hardly reserving anything. It was very minor. And then there was, okay, we're going to get a bit more aggressive on the rates through those 2 years, and we started putting a little away, and then it leveled out. And then from 2022, we put, exponentially more away in those disciplines, those service reserves, and that's a great thing that we've been able to do. So that's been certainly increasing under the current rate strategy that we have. Is it absolutely satisfying everything in the asset management plan and all depreciation? No. And I'm not even sure I think it's appropriate to try and do that over a short period of time. That's so aggressive.
So I see Councillor Burton, Paula, I think, and Councillor Brown, but I wanted to respond to what the Mayor said. This is a philosophical question. The philosophy being is that we are committed to our asset management plan. And that is should be the guiding principles and point the way future, I think that we, I don't want to be hamstrung with low percentages or whatever before I would say what I would want to do with this. And I think we should do an exercise moving forward and bring back to us what 2025 to 2029 looks like. Fall into a future wildlife, right? But I think the guiding principle of that discussion is what is the asset management plan telling us, because we're committed. Councillor.
So to half of what I was going to say. The other is when we had our financial report, we asked the question, what's the number one concern? Or which area of these financials would we be the most concerned about not funding? The answer is utilities. If I remember, we were about $1 million short when we had them all up.
So that can be close between water and sewer, you're 700.
Yeah, I think that's number 8. I think that's number 8.
Yes.
So the point lastly I'll make is the same one I made prior to years, so repeating myself. In the institution, one reason I asked for that number is the thing we're talking about. Many of them don't pay taxes. That's right. So we're spreading the love. So our churches, our schools, our hospital, courthouse, this goes on. They don't pay directly, they don't pay property tax. There is a check that we made and told the first time.
We have some grants in lieu on some of the
Yes,
property.
on some of it. So that's a weak number compared to what you really pay in taxes. So if we look at the town as what's our total revenue from all sources, one of the main ones is tax, but decided would be utilities. And so to get that total that we need, part of it is utilities, and other have somebody contributing with those institutions that aren't paying regular tax that all the neighbors are. And again, I don't know how big of an impact it is on the next time. Anyway, I think that's really an important point to me.
Actually, Councillor Burton, I just hope that
Councillor, I thought did a while ago too. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a couple of questions. Are there any riders included in this? Any extra riders? We go with the sewer plant.
So we currently have no riders on any of the utilities right now.
Okay, so are we looking at that possibly if it's
You may as a way of paying the debenture on the sewer plant, depending on where that number lands. I'm still being optimistic that we're going to be able to find most of that. But yeah, currently we have no riders that are set to come off of any utilities right now.
one of the things that you're talking wherever I was in Waterton enjoying a beautiful long weekend. My business says you're on council. I said, yeah, no, it's all the day. It doesn't stop them. They're very upset with the smell and the taste of the water. I said, I use an RO system. And she says, we're paying much for water. Why should you have to buy an RO system? And they're very upset. They have people coming in, family up, who would drink the water. So, but I don't know what they're going to do about it. But I just saw since we're talking about water, I'll throw that out there.
Okay. I am waiting with bated breath on the results of the groundwater investigation that we're doing, and I'm hoping that we can see groundwater as a superior source, and then we decide what to do, whether we stay with what we got or whether we should.
Higher for them, higher interest rate. Now we're losing businesses because every dollar counts, So I think we have. I'm in full support of keeping it as low as possible. I mean, obviously we're not going to get everything back that we need to, and we have to have some, but we've got to be careful with those businesses.
Yeah, I just want to echo Councillor Court's last comment about the smell and taste of the water. And, I get Kenneth on that all the time. I go to Jeff, we discuss it.
start to assume, let's just say for easy discussion, inflation was 4% a year, and I don't know that, but let's just say, all things being equal, the amount you put in reserves would start to decline by that because you were trying to cover everything else off.
And for those kind of reasons, that is contrary to the principles of asset management. Sorry. By free holding utility rates where they are. That's not what asset management is telling us. Asset management is telling us that in order to look out down the road in the future to be able to replace infrastructure, we need to put aside money today so that we've got it tomorrow. And I think, personally,
that's but today's taxes are going up. Like I get it. We want a nice future, but I'm also living in today and not the future. And so are people who make their ends meet right now.
Sorry, I've got to say, Councillor Kennedy, that didn't stop us as a council approving a $1.5 million loan for us. I agree with your sentiment about infrastructure.
Talking about water rate.
No, you can't have both. You can't make two different arguments. Sorry.
Had to choose between having
I agree. I'm just saying.
I hear what you're saying too.
Because taxes and utilities go up, people kind of.
I think we have to remember that Jeff I think it's important that we ask it because it's valid.
We can talk about the golf course if we want.
We're not going to.
Go on, we're good.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on this subject?
So just what I have at this point, we'll bring you total revenues and then break out each category that makes up the total revenues in water and sewer. I got garbage and at this point they're very small anyway, and our costs are fairly stable in those because they're contracted out. So those ones are actually doing fairly well. We'll talk about those by the end of the year for sure, but I didn't worry about that for today. So total revenues of all sources, break out institutional in particular, but we'll just break them all out. I'm going to work with Jill and Hawken and basically look at what the asset management plan forecasts over the next few years. Just a little bit for Councillor Kenley's questions, like, does that see an escalation in its forecast, or is it fairly stable? It should be pretty stable. That's how they're designed generally, so they don't have peaks and valleys. But I'm going to look at that closely to better answer your question, Councillor Kenley. And those are the plan and then break out reviews.
So the end game here, because the rates run out in 2024, that's the previous bylaw. So we as a council have to do something with this probably before the end of the year in terms of 4 or 5 years.
We try and give NMAX a month's notice so that things, well, if you don't give them a month's notice, it goes into effect February billing, not January. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but we do try and let them know by November what we are planning on for rates, and then they get that implemented in the billings.
So at some point soon, you'll bring something back to us in the way of a revised bylaws carrying on.
Well, next week we'll bring back the answers to some of these questions, get a feel from you guys, and then it'll be the first council meeting in October probably with the revised bylaw. Remember, you don't have a second council meeting in September because you're traveling to other meetings. Yes, we'll look at this, look to maybe get through it all in October.
All right, and we will move on to draft bylaw 1718, the unsightly premises bylaw. And Josh, I think that one's yours.
Yes, please. This is a new bylaw, and it's also quite a few amendments that are introduced at one time, but the vast majority of these are not substantive. We're removing redundancies, we're trying to simplify the process. I would just point out things. So we did add some language to boulevards and alleyways. So just to say that those areas need to be kept to consistent with the land they're adjacent to.
Mr. Chair, what is on that point? Is a question directly to you.
Sure, go ahead.
So, involving government, paragraph 7, does that deal with what you're talking about? So, your language including but limited to, should that be not limited to? Because not limited to, and it's two places in that document.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you. Including but not. Yeah, absolutely. That's what was intended.
Moves that from redundant to drop.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that. The other I would point out would be the addition of a voluntary payment. So this was something that Claire's Home does. So it allows someone to just come to the municipal office and pay. And this is something that's recommended because if you end up taking it to court, there's a cost there to have an employee go through all that process, as well as if a penalty is awarded in court, it's $75 town, $25 Alberta. So that's something that is common and we thought could be added here. It wasn't in the bylaw. So really the only two things that I'm putting in questions.
I have a question. Can you maybe help me with the little comment you have on the 20 and, well, it would be 21, I guess, 20 or 21. You have a little blog. I'm trying to understand the story of the penalties.
Right.
Can you help me understand what you intended to do there? Because you say that legally we may not have the answer to that. So, understand.
I have that question too.
Okay, well, there you go.
So the way I understood the way it was read before was to say that in the event an order to remedy is issued, the cost the town incurs to remedy, as well as any penalties, can be added to the tax.
Right.
I have not been able to confirm the legality of that. So I stick point in this.
So in the MGA, then it doesn't. What renders it voluntary? The provisions of the MGA, or about what's the voluntariness?
Yeah. Since the MGA is the one that confers bylaw powers, I assume it would be that as far as it being fines being voluntary. And I mean, how the court structure process is set up, where someone can pay a voluntary fine or they can challenge in court, that seems to imply it's voluntary, right?
If you have an example of non-payment of taxes, you can collect all of that. And they're obligated to pay tax, they're obligated, and if we don't, then we can collect all of it, and presumably including at least part of our costs of getting there. That would be awarded by the judge.
Okay.
So that's kind of similar provisions, because if it comes from the provisions of the MGA that, you know, these, and we even use the word voluntary in there. When we use the word, even if it were that way, we might say they may pay it. But bylaw says, well, it's completely wrong.
Right.
Pay it. There's not very many teeth in the tiger, you know what I mean?
Sure.
It just seems really odd to me.
Okay.
I don't know.
No, I could just get some more information to
Yeah. I would appreciate that too. Thank you.
And just so I understand, in the schedule then, are you suggesting that if you paid us reinforcement, they get a 50%
reduction.
Yeah, because the way it works at this point, to my understanding how it's been done as far as involving the court, is that 700, let's say non-residential property, first offense, that $700 fine, they can say, no, I'm not going to pay that because I'm not guilty. The judge may award all or less, but you can't do anything. Because it is a question of budget.
You may want to make it, if you stick with that, that they have, if you use the person, rather than
I would prefer the change in language too.
Anything from anybody else? So, I guess the intent will be at a future soon council meeting, we'll see the bylaw in front of us for first reading.
Yes.
Thank you, Marsha. Going to item 6, other business. The upcoming planning session agenda, post agenda. That means looking like still October 15th, right? So Jeff, why don't you do that?
Yeah, so I just wanted to start taking, what I did to create this is just anything that still wasn't completed within the strategic plan. I want to have on there, and so that we can talk about how does this wrap up over the next year? What does that look like? What does the conclusion look like? I will intend to bring in delegations on most of those items, as you can see. So in Southwest Construction, Associated Engineering, and all that, and so that we can have some discussion with them on how these things are moving along. But I assume, or at least I think, there's other things that you as a group want to talk about in your last year is this group on this term. If there's some things that you want to see as more priority or less priority, or things you want to on the docket as new items for the last year, that's all well and good. I just need feedback to make sure that we have enough time and have the right resources and people there so that we can have meaningful discussion. So I'm looking for feedback, and really I can take this even for the next couple of weeks. Anything that you might want to talk about, we have had in the past. It's been a little while, but I asked this once and I got a whole bunch of feedback, and I knew we simply couldn't do it all in a meeting. And so I sent out like a survey where we prioritized it, and we had a cutoff, and that worked fairly well. But right now I think we have lots of space on the agenda. I think there's some time there for a full day meeting, and so I welcome any feedback of other items that you may want to discuss.
Anybody today have something they'd like to throw out there as possible inclusion on the agenda?
Why don't we use the same?
Go ahead.
Why don't we use the same system as you did for us in the last retreat? Kind of.
You all around more. No problem.
Well, the one that's fresh in my mind, and we talked about this before as a council, but didn't really see any action of it, was probably a year and a half ago, and I think Councillor Kenley brought it up first, was, and I'm finding, talking to people out there, not everybody fully understands what we do, what we're working on, what we've accomplished, what are, and even some of the details of the strategic plan. But I find, people don't know some of the stuff that we've achieved, some of the things that are noteworthy. And yeah, we get media coverage and people talk, but I think there's some things that we're doing that people don't know about. And so, scenes doing with our consultant on Main Street redesign business.
I think it's pretty dang good at doing her quarterly, monthly, I don't even know, email where she puts it in the paper and she says, things we're working on, the things we've done, here's what to look forward to. So I think if people don't know, haven't looked, and I think our social media for the town is pretty great about updating,
people coming to me, what do you guys do? We don't know what you're doing. I've had that. I wonder if we had a concerted effort in terms of a public relations exercise to, through the use of the media that we've already got, to maybe talk about some of the things that we put in place. Like the good neighbor bylaw, for example. People know that we do. And I'm not saying that we aren't trying. I'm just saying how effective should it be, and that's what I would like to put on the agenda is could we be doing more that way to get our message out? That's my point. Not that we're not trying to do it, or it's not effective in certain ways or certain orders, but if it is, why are people saying to me, well, we don't know what the heck you're doing?
Do you refer them to the YouTube, to the sessions of council?
Yeah, all the time.
Or maybe you tell them to look at those sessions a little bit more.
Grocery store, I wear one of those fake glasses, nose and mustache. It was fairly well.
That's you? I totally went for that's you.
That's funny.
Okay, 6B, the ATCO franchise fee. Another one of those who be raising their own questions. So,
every year you have the opportunity to amend your franchise fee. You did move it 2 years ago. It was the first year of your term, I believe. We went from 15 to 20 points. reaches out. They did give some estimates for the 2025 amount, and I also included, and I meant to take a whole bunch of this out. There's a big document, 5 pages, all the South region where everybody was at, and then I was going to eliminate the 20 pages, but forgot to do that. But it was there just for your reference to see. You are falling in the middle, maybe just a bit above the middle if I average them all up, but not bad. Somewhere in the middle.
This would be one that I would like to stay on. I don't think we need to lift it at all. I would be comfortable with just a hold on this one. That's my personal view. Sorry.
Aren't the arguments related to this the exact same arguments related pro or con? I think it's the exact. It's A and B.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't bother me to raise it a little bit, because when you look at where we are, neighbors higher, slightly higher. Years of 2% increase. To me, again, this is a utility. It's got future costs, and it's similar to my view of utility rates.
I'd say this just about the agreeable to your comment to halt. It's just in this case, we are not responsible for the asset replacement. Right, so that's one of the differences with this utility, is that ATCO is responsible for the refreshing of their assets, not the town.
That makes a difference. So they're exactly the same.
Yeah.
That's my point.
It's an in and out to us. It's why because there's no benefits.
Well, there is a benefit there. I mean, it's revenue to us.
Yeah,
For sure,
that's
it's revenue to us. But we simply put that into revenues. It isn't being reserved for future replacement. It's not. So I just want to clear that.
For example, if your electricity bill was $100 a month, 4% of you raise it from 20 to 24, would be $4 a month on your electricity.
So then the argument that we have to follow the asset management plan doesn't apply, but the argument that we're sharing the love.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if you wish to find additional revenues, particularly from your institutional, but the other challenge with this rate is with your water and sewer, you can specify the rate for institutional. You don't have that opportunity to do that
All
with
the
franchise.
rates.
It's just,
So you can't designate between classes of users with the franchise fee, where you can with your water and sewer. You have greater discretion. Let's say.
so you're introducing this tonight at some point. Come back to us and say, okay, what do you want to do?
So given the responses around the table, there may be, we could look at it 2 ways. If there was, let's say if there was a motion to recommend to council to address the franchise fee, I would put it on a future agenda. If there isn't, and it looks like everyone just wants to go with status quo, I just won't do anything with it, we'll just leave it alone. Or I can just put it on your next council agenda and you can vote on, if someone wants to put a motion forward to change it to a certain amount, you can have a vote on it and see where that lands. I'm happy to do any of those.
And if there was consensus tonight, say that we are okay at 20, leave it there, by a show of hands, just drop it.
I just leave it alone. I wouldn't do anything more.
So maybe then, chair of this meeting, go around the table, ask each of you, are you okay leaving it where it is, or would you make some increase?
I guess my preference would be to deal with both of those rates at the same time. That all of our utility rate and our ATCO rate and our utilities. I think I think some of the arguments are the same.
Okay, well, then I guess you're open to moving it from 20.
I'm open.
Okay.
I would like to at least look at it with, in light of the other utilities that are allowed to change.
Councillor?
I'll give it 20.
I'm open to a slight increase. But
Three on one. Another. We're just not like an overly comfortable position.
only the two of us said we were open to looking at an increase.
So why don't I put it back on the time we have the utility bylaw on? I'll just put it with the discussion and you guys can stew on that. And we got time. Again, we're not panicked on this one either. And it'll be part of the utility discussions in October. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Item 6C, Alberta Municipalities Conference resolutions. Jeff, I guess you could summarize that for us, please.
So, depending on how much reading you need to show you are not required to all vote the same on resolutions. Let me preface with that. But there might be a few of those that you want to make sure that as a group you are supporting something that you feel strongly about, or you are opposed to something you feel strongly about. This is important. And so I always put this on there for you to be looking at, and maybe there's some things you want to make sure your colleagues have a really strong look at before you get to the conference. And this is a great time just to kick that around if that's the case.
There are some resolutions that really deserve a little bit of our attention. For example, B1, Independent Office of Integrity for Local Government. I would take the time to read that one. There is some that I really don't understand why they're even there, but B3 is an interesting list on property tax reform. Maybe you want to read that one. B19, I wanted to ask a question regarding, do we ever have a goldfish infestation in a sewer plant or wherever, or in a water? Or I'm thinking, how did this one manage to get there? I don't know.
They did find an alligator in Erie recently.
Yeah. And
That voting,
Till fall anyway. Till
So-
it was over.
C6 is also something rather interesting. It's about old fogies like me.
Mary, could I make a suggestion that if you've read them, and I confess I haven't,
I think it might
if,
vote.
if there are 3 or 4, whatever, that you feel,
There's 3 or
could you
4.
just send an email to us and read these?
Yeah, I will do that because there are some that really may be pertinent to us and the rest, whichever.
If you were to just summarize the
I
3 or
will.
4 that you important and which way you would vote, that would be helpful.
You'll send out the booklet from.
Yeah.
But they're all here.
You know,
Ready for counseling. You guys can have a look at these, and if there's something that perks your interest or your attention, can we put an agenda item on the next council meeting to discuss those ones out of the bunch that we think as a council and as a community that we can get behind, that we should focus on. So that when we finish that council meeting, we go to AD meetings with an idea of the array of resolutions, that these particular ones will be of interest to us in the community. Suggestions. We can do this quickly. This means that we all have to have a quick flash through. Okay. All right. I think we can move on to 6D, the rural development and the public engagement request from Jeff.
Yes. So we've been participating, and Joshua's been helping Becky get feedback out on affordable housing in the region. The response so far, according to Becky, she seems to be quite pleased. They're doing some public engagement sessions. She she's going to find out right away that all of her councillors on all of her boards can't make the September 24th and 26th one because you're so she just didn't know that when she sent it out. But what she's looking for, she would like to have some participation from councillors and staff in those public engagement sessions. And again, not a lot is sorted out about them yet, but it looks like it'll probably be that week over the second or third, once you eliminate the ones where everyone's at Alberta Munis. So my thought, and I don't mean to volunteer either of you, but Councillor Court and Kennedy, you're the ones on the Chinook Foundation. I don't know if you feel that's, and again, Mayor, by all means, anyone that wants to attend those, just let me know and I'll let Becky know, and either Joshua or I will be.
Having citizens who are interested to respond to that. And she says she had about 200 response, which is a lot, is significant, it's quite good. So we had done a survey with senior citizens years back, Jeff, if you remember. And following that, we had contractors, local contractors look at it, but they felt that what those citizens wanted was not realistic for them from a financial perspective.
So if I remember correctly, when we discussed our participation in housing lots, it was fairly unanimous thumbs down. So what, at the end of the day, what do we hope to accomplish through this?
Yeah. Progressive ones. If you remember, they put together that report for you. So the authors had, okay, these are a number of things that councils can do to assist building or get involved in affordable housing. What was lacking from that is what's the need. And so to fulfill this strategic plan item, this was a way that it just kind of ended up in our lap because Chinook got a grant and got this survey done. So we just had some office time to get some responses, and hopefully we can see if there is a agreement.
I think our consensus was I'm not at all against gathering the information for the needs.
Yeah.
That's the developers, right? If
Right.
somebody says, well, do I do it here, do I do it in Cardston? If we've got more need, they do it here. Right? So I'm not against it. I'm just tempering how we do.
Yeah. It's all a matter of funding, right? Who pays for it?
Becky's looking at the idea that the Chinook Foundation
That's what I was wondering.
and stuff.
Yeah.
I would hope that we mean what we're trying to actually to Alberta for a year. Coming up to me and we heard about this and that. And so far as I know, things are kind of interested in nobody's done anything. In our case, of course, Black Card took care of all that because they were building these units. And he's talking another 10 units up there. They've already started the second one, looks like to me.
Councillor Grainger.
And they're too expensive.
If I to important thing and why I would support us at least getting the information on the table and supporting that is that if there are programs for funding for accessible housing or different housing on the spectrum, it's going to flow through the housing program. it's going to be councillors that are going to be seeing that, applying for that management. So I think Councillor Burton, I think you're right that it wasn't council's position to dive all into building community housing. However, we sit on a board there that may be the recipient of we can show need. So I think it'd be good to be involved.
And we could be the one helping, writing the letters, whatever.
So, back to the original premise, councillors.
Mayor, did you want to attend again? I think anyone's
Yeah,
open to, so I'll just tell Becky, Councillors Court and Kenley, so Councillor Kenley away. Okay, Councillor Court. October 3.
I would prefer the second,
Okay.
if you can make it.
October
Second.
Wednesday the 2nd, Thursday.
Is that a problem? Are you going to be okay?
wait.
Mayor and Councillor Court and Josh.
That's usually what I have over the Southwest. First Wednesday after.
We'll push for the 2nd on Tuesday. For the
Is that all good?
Okay. So are we going full to Sue?
I'll just send her in, and you're going to have to weigh and balance of every other councillor that might be attending too. So
Okay, well, one or the other.
Okay.
One or the other is fine.
if
I'll make it through.
Okay, moving on. Item 7 is questions. That discussion that went on this afternoon, you okay?
Yeah, I think we can slide that into our street discussion. I have
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So, a month ago, I raised the issues of leafy bush. I don't know if we did anything about it. Trees and bushes hanging over into the public areas. I think we're going to address that through the on-site and premises exercise. And creek erosion. Detail is that.
so, I'll give you what I know as of today. So obviously the window originally was closed because it was so closed. There's been a request, so all the parties are aware that if DFO issues us a longer window, then everyone else will also agree, is what it is. So
It hasn't died.
no. So DFO is considering basically through the end of the winter. And the other parties have said, yes, we'll follow suit. If that goes through.
Okay, thank you. Did you do anything with leafy storage?
I'd have to ask Parks and Rec.
This is the worst I've ever seen.
It's everywhere. It's scary.
Well, a lot of it's on